Hi and welcome back to the channel, and today the used car conveyor belt has brought us a 2005 Ford Focus. And my task today for the sum total of £100 is to try and improve the appearance of this car and literally polish some profit back into it. So a question you might ask is, why would you bother doing that for £100? And simply, it's a fill-in job. So understandably, like most people, I book a certain amount of work in for a week, and should a car go mechanical or someone cancel something, I have a couple of these cars usually parked around the back in storage, and it's one of those things I can just pick it up, and rather than not doing something for an afternoon, I can just tidy up something like this and continue to work and earn money. So on the engine bay here, all I've used is a microfiber cloth just to bag up, or cover up I should say, the alternator, and then on the front there was a pipe which led to the airbox that obviously was missing a bit of plastic on the top of it. Don't want to get any water into the air intake, so I'll just cover that up as well. Agitate the all-purpose cleaner with a little brush and then just rinse it off. Once the engine bay's washed, we're going to dress that with Autoglim's Super Sheen. This can be applied wet or dry, and once it dries itself, it will leave a nice OE looking sort of silk sheen finish. Always tend to start with the engine bay. Once that's done, it's onto the other sort of things like petrol flap, door shuts, wheel arches, and then finally I'll go over the body of the car. And I can confirm that in the last 10 years the wash process has got longer, because nearly every single car now has fabric wheel arch liners, and they attract mud like no man's business. The only downside to doing these £100 sort of details is that where do you draw the line of what you should and shouldn't do? I'm always in the habit of taking things like the spare wheel well out and giving that a good clean. Obviously rocking the seat forward so you can get around where all the catches are, lifting the rear seats up as get over the sort of debris underneath those. I do feel sometimes it's a little bit sort of hard to not do the extra bit to make the car look nicer. So once the car's thoroughly vacuumed, we'll look to clean all the plastics inside the car. For that I'm going to use an all-purpose cleaner, probably of a 10:1 dilution ratio, and it's usually going to be Surfix by Built Hamber or Kosh Chemie Green Star. It's a simple case to spray it on, scrub it with a detail brush, and then I'm going to use a damp microfiber cloth just to remove the residue. I'll rinse that out in a bucket to keep it clean, and I'll also introduce an airline, and I'll use that to sort of push the water out of the cracks and joins in the plastic trim. Onto the seats, and yeah, these are pretty disgusting. So nice sort of soaking in all-purpose cleaner, get the drill brush out. That's going to really help, sort of get into the pile of the fabric and loosen off the encrusted dirt out of there before we start going over the wet vac. And again, likewise, I'm only going to show you the highlights here. I'm not going to show you, hours of cleaning seats. It gets a bit monotonous, but as we can see, the amount of filth going up the extractor, it was well worthwhile doing. Some of these seat bases can take 2 or 3 times to, really get all the filth out. So some top tips about how to dry a car afterwards. So a number of different ways. Some people, if it's a nice warm sunny day in a good climate, just leave the windows open if it's in a safe area to do so, and it'll dry naturally. You can also start the car, put the internal heater on, just make sure it's not on recycle, obviously, because otherwise the moisture can't get out of the car. A lot of my customers nowadays, to be honest, just stick a dehumidifier in the back of the car, and that seems to do the trick. Leave it overnight, and before you know, you come back in the morning and the little tank's full and the car's nice and dry inside. So with all the general scuzz and slime and disgustingness removed from those seats, we can tip that down the drain, and for the next person who's going to buy the car, they haven't got to sit in all that, which has got to be a more pleasant place to be. With that done, we can put a nice dressing on all the plastics. Our preference here is Aerospace 303. I tend to spray it on, and as we can see, I've got one of these little microfiber mitts, and it's really good for just sort of rubbing it into all the little areas. Sometimes I'll go over with a nice clean microfiber just to pick up any residue as well afterwards. Another little gizmo you can get is these detailing swabs. and they're fantastic for getting in little air vents areas and stuff like that, or more intricate areas. You can buy them off Amazon or eBay in packs of 100 relatively cheap. They're well worth buying, and you can use them for a multitude of different things on a car. And this Motor Trade has gone all out and supplied us with some aftermarket fabric mats for the car to improve the interior, and some top tech wheel trims. I honestly think he looked at the shelf of the ones up for sale and thought, yes, those are the most horrendously ugly looking wheel trims, I'll buy those and fit them. You know these are high quality when they supply the cable ties with them, because if you have a strong wind or fart too hard in the general direction, these wheel trims will fall off or crack. With the horrendous wheel trims fitted, it's a case of spraying some tar and glue remover down the side, let it soak for 5 minutes and then rub off all the horrible tar spots. This is now a good opportunity to put the windows up, but before we do that, we're always going to do the tops of the windows first, just to get rid of that awful tide line which you sort of get around that area. And then we'll put the window up fully before we start working on the outside of the car. And to battle the years of neglect on the outside of the car, we're going to use a Chemical Guys Quantum Cutting Pad with a Flex dual action polisher which oscillates and rotates, as we can see on camera. And we're going to be using some Kosh Chemie H901 compound, which, as we can see, has got lots of cut, which we're going to need on this older car, but also gives a moderate gloss level. And I've got to be honest, doing these trade vehicles, this combination for me works really, really well. I get some comments saying, does it give a super high gloss finish? You'd be surprised, it's pretty good. It depends what your expectations are and what your budget is. But for something like this, when we're on the lower end of the scale and we just want to improve and enhance the bodywork, this is a really quick, fast step. And I enjoy using it. It's just really easy to polish with, it finishes down very well and buffs up to reasonably good shine. Now I'm pointing to a couple of areas here. This vehicle has already been buffed and there's signs of the paint starting to get a little bit thin in areas, so I couldn't spend hours grinding away at the panel. I wouldn't have done it anyway, but it's the best we could do what we had given the situation. So once the glass is thoroughly cleaned, we can go around the body and just do a few touch-ins. So the paint was provided by the paint shop, who obviously did some repairs on this car, and I know the paint looks like the wrong colour on camera. That's purely because it's water-based. So you'll find that whereas the old solvent ones were a perfect match almost out the tin, water-based paint looks a kind of bit quirky like this, but as it dries out it goes to the correct colour. But however, you do need to put some lacquer over the top, otherwise it will literally wash off. So with all that done, we can take the vehicle outside and do some before and afters, and it's turned out pretty good. You know, I think it's a nice improvement than what was originally there. The idea of this is to make it look presentable so that somebody who's on a bit of a budget and wants a cheaper car, and the used car network will hopefully find this and it will do them a good turn. And from my point of view, I do get some good job satisfaction out of these sort of things. I think it's the ability to keep an older car on the road for a bit longer and give it a new lease of life. They're also a really good experiment as well. If I get some new products or things, I can test them on these older cars and nobody's going to get upset, and it can give you a good honest opinion of what does and doesn't work. As mentioned earlier when I washed it, that little bit of trim there's missing, so the used car dealer will get a bit of plastic trim to cover that up properly. But overall the insides come up very well, all that dust and filth's gone. I do find this sort of fabric in these older Focuses, when they were new, they were always a bit of a troublesome to clean. They used to dry sometimes and you'd be left with like a tide mark or a stain. And if you ever get that, if you've cleaned a seat in a car and you've got a mark on it afterwards, don't rush to get the wet vac back out again. Sometimes you can just get a damp microfiber and some clean water and just gently rub it over the surface of the seat, and you can find it remove those marks instantly. Anyway, as always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next week.